Hello, and welcome to Arts and Entertainment.
With Chris and Randall.
I'm Chris.
I'm Randall.
And welcome to the show. As I always like to start the show, if you are enjoying what you're going to hear today, or if you're a fan and you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. And if you want to comment, you have an idea for a future show, please contact us. Randall, what's the best way to contact us?
Just go to our website, chrisandrandall.com. I have two L's in my name. And also...
I've often misspelled it, so that's actually pretty helpful. And I don't feel so bad. I actually have done that.
Everybody misspells it. Also, our Facebook page is really great for comments. I mean, people like to leave comments there.
Yeah, that's great. I'm always checking it out. We do have a YouTube as well, so if you leave comments on YouTube, we'll see that. But we do always want to know what do you think, and if you agree with us or you disagree with us. Today is definitely a show where Randall and I are not going to argue with each other. We're just going to piss everyone off who's listening instead, because apparently it was weird. In working on this, we sometimes work independently of each other, and then we sit down to talk. And I was really anticipating that you and I were going to argue. And oh no, we're one of the same mind. So Randall,
we agreed on like everything.
This episode is being recorded on February. Is it February 10th? Yeah, February.
You're making me check. Yes.
Yeah, I know. COVID days, we just kind of forget. So it's February 10th, 2021, and last Sunday was Super Bowl 55. And you know how I keep track of? I always remember what number we're on in Super Bowl.
How?
I'm 1 month older than the Super Bowl. So I just figured out whatever age I am, that's what Super Bowl. I cannot read Roman numerals.
Wow, you're the same age as the Super Bowl. It's amazing.
I am this, yeah, and not as popular or as widely seen. But that's my point, which is that we're not going to talk about sports or athletics, but we're going to talk about, within the context of arts and entertainment, the Super Bowl halftime show.
Well, we're going to talk about. Can I just say
Super Bowl commercials?
Yes. Can I just say, yeah, I think that the Super Bowl is. We're going to make the case. We're making the case already that the Super Bowl is probably the most significant artistic entertainment event in the entire world every year, and the reason is because it's seen by the most people, and it costs the most money. I mean, if you judge our civilization, if you judge the art by how much the civilization is willing to put into it, the resources our civilization is willing to put into it, then the Super Bowl and the Super Bowl halftime show and the commercials, they win.
And to really heighten the stakes, when we say it's a lot of money, what we mean is both a lot of money is spent in the product, in the production, but also point of Super Bowl is getting viewers. So because it gets the most amount of viewers, it charges the most amount for airtime. So this year, airtime was a little cheaper than last year, but it was $5.5 million for 30 seconds. Now, last year, 102 million people watched. This year was a little off. It's 96, which is why they charge less. But still, about a third of the nation watched the Super Bowl.
I believe that's a worldwide audience as well, isn't it, Chris? Because I know they watch it in Canada and some other countries.
Yeah, but where it's most popular. Football is still a sport for the most part whose popularity is local. And it's a weird thing because it's not. So in that sense, I hate arguing with you right off the bat. The Oscars is more watched than the Super Bowl. It is. That's a fact because everybody in the world watches movies and they all want to see. So I think almost 1 billion people watch the Oscars. But the neat thing about the Super Bowl, unlike the Oscars, is it's the show that is watched the most by Americans. More Americans watch the Super Bowl than anything else. And that's important because, when the Super Bowl first came out in 1966, there were 3 networks and the majority of Americans watched whatever was on all 3 networks. So if you were, the Lucille Ball show or Bonanza, well, pretty much everybody you knew was watching Bonanza at the exact same time. In fact, you couldn't call somebody if Bonanza was on because you knew they would be watching Bonanza. So you wouldn't even talk to them until it was over or the next day. everything was Lion King. You know what? Not Lion King, Tiger King. If you can imagine, like everything was Tiger King. So when the Super Bowl first came out, that was the world it was living in. And in this modern day and age, just by my reference, there's nothing left in this country that as an Americans, we all just sit down and do. It's just at least not when it comes to entertainment. It's just not done anymore. And, the America that we're living in today is there's two big, I hate doing this, but I apologize, folks. I really don't like talking about this, but you cannot talk about what's going on today without talking about COVID and talking about the political dissonance, the separation in our society, So right now, America is both suffering from a pandemic at the time of this recording, and it's also going through one of its biggest social upheavals, essentially a civil war of a sort. And this is the America that is celebrating the Super Bowl. And this is the America, the halftime show and the commercials on some level are representative of the world, the America we're living in today. So in a way, by looking at I would say, Randall, by looking at the halftime show and the commercials, even if we're looking at them as a form of entertainment or a form of art, it becomes inescapable also looking at the context in which they're created, right?
Yeah, totally agree.
I mean, traditionally for me, one of the things I've enjoyed about the Super Bowl, even more than the Oscars, is going to a friend's house, hanging out with a lot of people, getting drunk, eating a lot of food, and watching the game and watching the commercials and watching the halftime show, right? You've done that.
Yeah, and I'll just add that, the Super Bowl over the years, how old are you, Chris?
55.
All right, so we're at Super Bowl 55. It's been around for 55 years. The Super Bowl over the years, because of the mass audience, it's evolved to be this this amazing artistic showcase. So all these big companies will do ads just for the Super Bowl a lot of times. I mean, one of the most famous ones was the Apple ad directed by Ridley Scott.
Ridley Scott, yeah,
in 1984.
That was basically his version of the movie 1984.
It ran once. It was it was a remake of 1984 to sell Apple computers.
Exactly. So there have been very big commercials or movies that had their special trailer during the Super Bowl, or TV shows that have had. We're not going to talk about trailers, just to let you know, because I don't really think, I think they're their own thing. They're trailers. We can, one day, future episode, do the art of the trailer. But right now,
well, it's just
we're not going to talk about it.
Yeah, we're not going to talk about trailers, but so it's very interesting to both of us how the Super Bowl has evolved into this this intense artistic showcase for the entire nation.
Let me just get a little bit into the history, man, because I think you're going to find it really interesting. Because I do remember watching the Super Bowl back when I was in high school in the early 80s, and maybe even the 70s I might have watched it. But, for the first 20 or 30 years, really from like the 60s to the early 90s, it was just marching bands and gymnastic teams. And each year it'd have a theme, like a salute to New Orleans or a salute to old Hollywood. Like Up With the People has performed 4 times, during that period. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, if they'd have a celebrity, it'd be like Mr. Fred Astaire. It was like, it was hokey, it was campy, it was very middle brow at best.
Well, let me just add to that, because I was in marching band in high school. So traditionally, you have a marching band at the football game, and they're in the stands, and they play a little musical accompaniment to keep the show going, the game going. And in halftime, the marching band goes out the field, and they do this thing called a field show, where they play and they make little geometric patterns on the field, and it's very traditional. I mean, it still goes on, of course.
The field show is kind of interesting to me, and this would be a good point of discussion, because the field show has always been the halftime show traditionally. Why do you think that is? That the field show has normally been the halftime activity?
Well, I mean, it comes from the late 1800s. John Philip Sousa. The marching band is, I want to say it's an American invention, and invented by John Philip Sousa, and he took an orchestra, a symphony, and he put them on their feet and had them march down the street. And it was pretty. I mean, it was the pop music of like 100 years ago, 150 years ago maybe, and that was the music you had in the stadium. I mean, this is the music you had before there was recorded music, and before they had speakers in a football stadium.
So when you were in high school and you were in marching band, you did field show. Like, was that a lot of intense drills and?
Yes, you have to. You have to learn the music. You have to play the music, and you got to learn where to walk and where to stand during the while you're playing it. It's a whole thing.
So it's interesting because I do think that it is definitely a form of entertainment. You're watching precision drills, and what you do with it now. You did not do that at SC, right?
No, I went to USC, but I only did marching band in high school.
Because they are like one of the best marching bands in America, right?
Yeah, I was a little intimidated by that. I wanted to learn things in school and not like spend all my time in marching band. But
it's pretty intense, right? Have you ever seen the USC Marching Band at any?
Yeah, they're legendary. They're legendary. I heard, how are they? Well, let me tell you, I heard horror stories about them before I went to SC, so it made me not want to be in the marching band.
Wow. Okay, so. Anyway, I'm not knocking the field show at all, and I actually think the field show is fascinating, and it is absolutely an art form, definitely an entertainment. I don't know if it's I think this is an interesting point, and it's worth bringing it up right here, right now. I think you can agree with me that when we talk about entertainment, the primary goal of entertainment is to entertain, and by entertain, I mean divert, right? Take your mind off things, amuse you with a playful, imaginative sense, right?
Yeah, you're trying to give the audience what they want.
Yeah, and you're trying to raise their spirits, take their mind off of their troubles, distract them, put them in a happy head, a good frame of mind. I think the point of art is an artist is conveying a feeling, an expression, a thought to you, the viewer, the spectator, the person watching. And so art has an intent and a message, and it doesn't have to be to entertain you or to make you feel good or to even distract you. It can often actually reinforce the world around you, but just through the point of view of the artist. Art does have a point of view, and I think that's what always separates it from entertainment. Yeah,
the way I like to put it is art is pure expression of the artist, and entertainment is pleasing the audience, but the two can overlap. I mean, wouldn't you agree?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But I do think, in fairness, that the marching band, for the most part, is a form of entertainment. And maybe you don't agree because you've spent more time on it. So
no, totally. The marching band is pop music from 100 years ago. So definitely.
Yeah, and it's about the precision. It's about the precision. Now, about the early 90s, like 1992, they brought in the Miami Sound Machine, back when that was a very big thing. Gloria Estefan, look her up. She's cool. And they started getting, like, at that point, they started getting people who were well known. I think it was 1993, they got Michael Jackson to perform. And oh my God, in general, the Super Bowl never pays people. You have to pay for yourself. But the Super Bowl didn't pay Michael Jackson, but they made a donation to his charity along with the sponsor of that Super Bowl, Frito-Lay. So anyway, the Michael Jackson one, and you can find it on YouTube. It's Michael Jackson. It's just, it's as amazing a show as you're going to see. It's like 17 minutes of just pure Michael Jackson putting on magic. And it was a game changer, even more so than I would say Miami Sound Machine, because it really showed, like, oh my God, that period of time can really keep people watching.
Well, I want to say something about his show in '93. You can watch it on YouTube. I just want to say that I saw a Michael Jackson concert around that same era as a kid.
Yeah.
And that was very similar to his live shows. I mean, there were some touches for the Super Bowl, but that's a pattern, I think, that most of these bands that do Super Bowl shows going forward.
Well, I'll get into that in a bit, because I think there's a point I'm going to make that may challenge that. So, but it's certainly it's a great concert moment, right? Like you're just watching him doing great concert work, and you've seen him in concert. So that really was where he was at in '93.
Yeah, that was very
And then,
similar
like in
to his concert from that
'95,
era.
they do a salute to Motown, and it's Diana Ross, and she gets picked up at the end by a helicopter. The helicopter lands in the stadium and picks her up. It's like magic. And then Prince, I think it's '97. Again, and you are beginning to notice a trend in the kind of music, but it's also people like Phil Collins, and then around, was it 2003, 2002, somewhere at the very beginning of, I should have memorized this date.
I mean, I can look it up.
The infamous Justin Timberlake Janet Jackson controversy, where accidentally there's a wardrobe malfunction, and because there's a wardrobe malfunction, unfortunately, and I watched that.
That was 2004.
It was 2004. I was close. So after that, they kind of like dialed it back a bit, and instead of getting pop singers and dancers, they would get like the Who and the Rolling Stones and Paul McCartney, and they got a lot of rockers. And you know, when you think of football, you do really think normally of guys. And because as time keeps on moving forward, basketball has really supplanted football as America's sport. So for a good portion of the early part of the 21st century, it was just kind of geared towards like a boomer dude or a Gen X dude. And it was just like, you know, Aerosmith with Britney Spears with Aerosmith, you know, like, so she was pop, but you had to have like Aerosmith there to give it a, you know, where you have Sting, you know, to give it that edge. And then in 2011, I think that's really the game changer, because that's when they get the Black Eyed Peas. That's when they had that hit song.
Yeah, if you haven't seen it, that is a great show, wouldn't you say, Chris? The Black Eyed Peas really brought it.
It's a great show. First off, that's when they had that hit song, "Let's Get It Started Here," and I Got a Feeling. And they come in. The Black Eyed Peas, you know, some of them even started out as child performers. They're the show. You know, they're colorful. Fergie is attractive. She wears great clothing, and there's dancing, and there is excitement, and you don't have to be an old dude or a man. Like, you could just be even a young person. It's hipper. It's more relevant. It's not just a band sitting on a stage, going up and down the stage, just playing guitar.
I just want to say it was a beautiful show. They used the whole field. It was filled with people. It was gorgeous.
Yeah, they used the whole field. It's filled with people. They get off the stage. They're not just standing around, you know, playing to the. It's not just a concert anymore. Now all of a sudden it has a sense of place. And then the next year they make the best choice they can make. They get Madonna. You know, and Madonna is brought out like she's Cleopatra crossed with Vikings and Rome. And, you know, it's these Roman soldiers, you know, carrying her out on this long procession.
She's the queen. They're carrying her on a litter on her throne.
Yeah, she's like an empress. And she's brought out onto the field by like literally maybe 100 guys just on a, you know, carrying her. It's so over the top. And she does a lot of her well-known songs from her at that point. It's pretty impressive to think about it, but it's 2012, so she had been around since like 83, 82. So it's 30 years, and she's in her early 50s and a little younger than me and a little older than you, and she looks great, and she's dressed in the most out there, like she's got a Valkyrie helmet on, and just it's insane clothing, and she's dancing with her dancers, and there's different shifting of the stage, and her clothes, and then they bring out CeeLo, who at the time was very popular, and you know, he sings like a prayer with her, and you have a chorus of people in church clothing, and then at the very end she disappears down a chute. and you can watch this on YouTube, by the way, folks. It's, you know, all of these halftime shows are less than 15 minutes. They're like 12 minutes long, you know, but every second now, it's like the Black Eyed Peas, but on steroids. Because now every everything has been choreographed. All the lighting has been now brought in. Video has been brought in. There's that scene where they do Vogue, where the camera is above the stadium, so you can see covers of Vogue magazine. But if you're in the stadium, you wouldn't see it. So they're now using, different angles. They're using fireworks. They're using light shows. They're using costume changes. It's very it's geared, I think, for both the people in the audience to get excited, and it's also geared for the viewer at home. What are your thoughts on the Madonna one?
Yeah, earlier I was trying to talk about like some of these bands, their shows are stagey. They're more like a concert show with like a stage, and then some of them they're trying to break out of the stage. I mean, not many. I think the Black Eyed Peas. I mean, I'm glad you brought that up because I really think they're trying to break away from the stage. They still use a stage, but they're using the whole field. It looks gorgeous. I mean, it looks gorgeous from a distance. I think Madonna's show is a little bit stagey. I would imagine.
No, I agree. I think it's very theatrical, and I would say the next person who really ups it up a notch on the theatricality, and I agree with you. I think one of the best halftime shows ever is Katy Perry.
Ah, Katy Perry. We both agree. It's probably the best one. I mean, I think it's the best one.
Well, she's brought in on like a fake lion,
she
right?
She rides in on a giant lion.
Yeah.
And she's singing. And there's all these people holding these lights on the field. It's like a sea of lights, and they part. And she rides the lion between them, through them. And she rides up and she gets off the lion and gets on the stage and does some stage stuff, and the stage changes. I mean, well, the whole field turns into a chessboard, and she's dancing with chess pieces, and then she gets on the stage, and the stage is like it's like a beach scene where she has these cartoon characters come to the sharks, and you have the famous left shark. Next to the right shark, and the cartoon characters come to life. I mean, it's beautiful. I mean, it's all from the mind of Katy Perry. And by the way, I watched this yesterday. There's an hour and 10-minute documentary called Katy Perry: The Making of Super Bowl Halftime Show. I watched it all.
Oh, I gotta watch it when we're done.
It's really awesome. Fun. It's like you watch Katy Perry direct. You see how involved she is. She's involved in every detail. She's amazing. I mean, it's a great show.
Aesthetically, it basically. It's kind of like what Star Wars was to science fiction movies. You know what I'm saying? Like, if Madonna is like 2001: A Space Odyssey, where she shows you can make it with a good budget, then Katy Perry shows that you can also just make it anything you want. You can make it as colorful as you like. It's very beautiful. But then there's one of my favorites is Lady Gaga, who parachutes in. Runs all over the stage, has different elements of the stage, does various costume changes, but she goes from like dance songs to piano songs to soft songs. She's all over it stylistically, but the way she's lit, you feel a good sense of intimacy that you don't feel in prior versions. They now actually know how to do the close-ups right. They now give you the ability to not just show her as a woman playing in a stadium, but as a woman in medium shots and close-up shots. And it works really well. And as these things start to progress, you realize that the song's selection starts getting broader, but the amount of time the song is played starts getting shorter. I want to mention like the Prince. Can I mention the Prince halftime show? Because for a lot of people, that's their favorite, and the Prince halftime show, it's not like a spectacular show in an aesthetic sense. It's basically like a Prince concert, but I think it's a lot of people's favorite because Prince is just amazing, I mean, well, yeah, but it's not, you also said it, it's just a concert. And in fairness, Prince is just an amazing concert. So all that Prince really did, and not to belittle Prince, but I think I'll stand by this. If you look at Prince or Michael Jackson or Diana Ross, all the 90s artists did was they just gave a sample of what a concert show is like, and it was just a good concert doc. You know what I'm saying? The camera's there, they're playing for everyone in the audience, and if something cool happens, great. But what's going on in this decade, It's just the opposite, where it's forging something that's more akin to musical theater, where you're no longer just standing on the stage sweating out the sparks. You're telling a story. There are visual elements. There's choreography, and because the camera now it's being filmed more like a film, where you can start seeing medium shot, long shot, and close up.
Well, the interesting thing, I'm not sure how they shoot it. I think in the Katy Perry documentary, they showed a little bit of it. I think that in a lot of these shows, they are able to use the Super Bowl's cameras. So if you imagine the way they're shooting the Super Bowl, they have like, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 cameras all aimed at the field. And so when they do these halftime shows, the halftime show has its own director. They come in and they can use the same cameras, and they get amazing. They have lots of choices.
They have a lot of choices. Some of the cameras they're using are not actually that game cameras. It's an interesting mixture, but it's not entirely game cameras. In fact, one of the things that you don't really see is the play-by-play camera that normally swoops down during the game. You don't see that at all. You do see other kinds of cameras, but my point is, it's not musical theater. With Madonna, it is musical theater, and I think even with Katy Perry, it's still a bit musical theater. But by the time you get to Lady Gaga, you're starting to see that the camera and the audience has to be considered almost more important than the people in the crowd. There was one with Justin Timberlake that got poor reviews, and the field is just full of people. And people felt like there just wasn't enough going on.
It's a very traditional concert, isn't it?
Yeah, and he's still running around in the bleachers and everything, but it doesn't seem to have a real... And he's a great dancer, but he seemed to get enveloped by the crowd. He gets lost in the size of the space. The space, he drowns, really, in a sea of people. And that's a shame, because I liked it, but I get the point, the criticism. And then it's interesting, because last year... Jay-Z became one of the people who worked on developing the halftime show, and he got J-Lo and Shakira. It was the first time. I mean, there's always guest artists, but this time he wanted to get two people to perform on it, and he deliberately wanted two Hispanic women because politically at that time Trump was president, and he had done all sorts of things to people who were in this country who were undocumented, including put children in cages. And it was held in Miami, so it seemed rather fitting to have Latin music, though J-Lo does announce right off the bat she's from the Bronx Boricua. But the music and the musical guests and the sounds were very much Latin music. Even the stuff was often in Spanish. There was a reggaeton, there was so many different variations of Latin music and Spanish language. And then there's that sequence where there's this girls chorus, and I didn't notice at the time, but I guess they were supposed to be in these things that were supposed to represent the cages.
Yeah, I didn't know until you told me.
Yeah, I didn't either. But so as a political statement I don't think it flew. You know what I'm saying? Like I remember when that was done, the biggest conversation is like, oh, Shakira's in her 40s and she looks great. J-Lo's about to turn 50. What's her secret? I mean.
It was a great show, though. I mean, Shakira and J-Lo were great. I mean, I really liked how they didn't try to, and this is an impulse we'll probably talk about more, but they didn't try to sand off like the rough edges for a mass audience.
Actually, that was really quite beautiful, and weirdly enough, once the halftime show started using pop artists, they dropped the idea of a theme pretty quickly. It was like a theme for Diana Ross, but by the time they got to Prince, certainly by the time they got to the 21st century, they did get pretty much rid of that, and it just became whatever the artist wanted. But, I really felt like if you watch it, and please do, it's great. It's such a great celebration of Latin pop music in America. It's so full of, it's. But you're right, it's deceptive, because while it is very entertaining, it is also, on some level, an artistic expression. It is also about, hey, stop, take notice. It was a diversity of Hispanic dancers. Did you notice that?
Oh yeah, I mean, she had all.
It wasn't just the Europeans. You know, it wasn't just a bunch of pale-skinned people. It
Well, you know,
all
Shakira,
kinds of.
Shakira's fan base is really, I think, in Latin America more than in America, and
Yeah.
it really shows. I mean, she was true to her fan base. She didn't try to like make something for an American audience.
And I thought J-Lo was too. I thought I really felt like you get it's a statement, you know, we're people, we have passion, we have art, we share this with you, we're diverse in sound and in appearance and style. And if you were paying attention, it was a great message. And if you were not paying attention, I think it worked as great entertainment.
Definitely.
Which brings us.
Yes.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, please.
Oh, and I'll say the other thing that is, you see a number of very things. That one uses it better than most, which is there's a lot of people on the field. There's a lot of people on the field. You know, they really get a lot of people. Most of these shows work ever since the Black Eyed Peas because there's so many people just all over. There's a swarm of people. There's times where you literally lose J-Lo because she disappears in a mob of people, or you lose Shakira in a mob of people. But the people themselves, especially when you get to the girls' chorus, you know, the way that they use the light for the final sequence with all the people, it's beautiful, but it works because there's so many people, and you can hear the sound of the people in the stadium and the cheering and the excitement. And it does the thing that you really hope to do, which is to make the viewer feel like they're sitting in the stadium with the audience watching the best live show ever. So flash forward.
Yeah, well, it's a simulacrum of a live show, a lot of these.
Exactly, it's the simulacrum. Or simulacrum. So flash forward to today, it's 2021. You can't have a full stadium. You have social distance, you have all of these things, and Jay-Z has picked an artist known as The Weeknd. We've talked about The Weeknd, haven't we, on the show?
I don't know if we've ever mentioned The Weeknd specifically.
I think we did, because I was talking about music today that I could kind of get by,
oh yeah, we did.
The number one song in America was "Blinding Lights."
You like his retro sound? We talked about his retro sound.
It's a retro '80s sound. He works with Daft Punk. His style borrows a little bit from Michael Jackson, a little bit from Prince, a little bit from David Bowie. You know, so there's a lot of great antecedents for an old fart like me to go, yeah. Like, I literally know a bunch of my buddies are like, I don't like new music, but, you know, this Weeknd dude, he's good because he sounds like when I was in high school. I don't know why I gave it a Brooklyn accent. What the hell is that about, Chris? But the thing about The Weeknd is, even though he's had 4 albums out, he is not, he is not a household name in the same way that J-Lo is a household name. Not the same way the Black Eyed Peas were a household name, or Madonna, you know. There's like, he's, how do you say that? Like, he's definitely an A-list artist, but he's a young person's A-list artist.
Well, he's had a lot of success. He's barely 30, I think, and so
he's exactly 30. But
so he has a career ahead of him, just about.
Right, but normally the way you normally go on these shows is to unite the demographics of the different generations and the men and the women. You get a pretty woman who's probably anywhere from like her 30s to early 50s, who has anywhere from a decade to 30 years worth of a catalog. And
well, Jay-Z is putting these shows together now, and Jay-Z's got some good taste. I mean, he understands that The Weeknd is one of the most visually interesting new artists of this era. It's
by the standards of the Super Bowl, and only by the standards of the Super Bowl, since he did have the #1 song in America. It's a little less middle brow than the traditional choice would be. It skews a little younger, it skews a little bit more urban, and I don't mean urban in the racist way. I just mean in that it's a particular kind of hipper dance music, you know, because it's new.
Well, can I say something interesting?
So tell me about your take on it.
Okay, I'll just say something interesting about The Weeknd, since you brought it up. Is so The Weeknd has been in his music videos and in his concerts and such, he's been trying to develop a visual language for himself and his songs. And so when he did the Super Bowl, he used that visual language. Now the Weeknd, now we already talked about, like, a lot of these shows, you know, they're very stagey. They're trying to make a simulacrum of a live show, and maybe because of COVID, the Weeknd couldn't do that. But to his credit, or whoever designed the show, is they decided they're not even going to have a stage. They basically had something that was like a theatrical backdrop in the back of the stadium.
Well, I mean, they did have a stage, but what they were able to do, which is different, is first off, they didn't have a full stadium, and they had to keep everybody 6 feet apart, and they had to keep people masked for the most part. So they took a part of the bleacher, and they made part of the bleacher a stage, a proscenium stage. And then they went behind the bleachers and they built an interior set. So unlike most Super Bowl shows where everything happens in the center of the field, instead of putting anything at the center of the field, they basically worked off of the risers of the bleachers and the room behind the bleachers. And then invariably they do get to the play field itself. But I feel like we're getting ahead of ourselves. I want to break down. He does 9 songs. There's a story in this one, right? I mean, this is actually the first time that we see a narrative.
Well, why don't you talk about it? He starts in the beginning. He's in Vegas. He arrives in Vegas in his car, right? Or right, whatever city it is.
No, Vegas. No, he arrives in Vegas in his car.
He gets out.
And, he gets out, and he's famous. He's got sunglasses on at night. He has a jacket made out of rubies. It weighs, I found out, 40 pounds. It was designed by Givenchy. Took 250 hours for 4 seamstresses to put together. I have a friend who has done seamstress work for the Super Bowl. It is a big deal. It is not cheap. And by the way, I forgot to mention, we said before the Super Bowl doesn't pay you. He spent $7 million of his own money to put this together. This is his project. He gets to make his calls. So he comes out, and again, kind of like Madonna's Like a Prayer, there is... No, actually, I'm sorry. At first, it's a giant city, a metropolis, and they reference Fritz Lang's Metropolis, where their masks are similar to the cyborg in Metropolis. And then from that, they go back to more like a church clergy with the white robes, which you've seen in a lot of... We've seen that particular look in a lot of halftime shows, but now because they're all on layers and they're all separated, it's interesting because they don't get lost in the huddle, right? Each of these guys in their gospel whites actually stands out.
Yeah, there's sort of a feeling of alienation. I think you were telling me about it.
Well, there's definitely a feeling of alienation and enormity because written on the text, there's text that says
there's
alone.
Neon signs in the city.
Neon signs in the city, and they say alone and gone. And then he runs inside, and he's in a fun house. And in the fun house, there's more signs that say alone and gone. And he's carrying, I guess, a camera, so it like with a fisheye lens.
Yeah, and his face gets all distorted when he gets too close to it.
It gets to, and then all of a sudden we see various versions of him, except they have their faces bandaged up. So they otherwise look just like him. They have the gloves, they have the ruby red jacket, but their faces, and they start filling up the frame. And as they fill up the frame, they kind of attack him.
Well, they're all bouncing around and he disappears, right?
And he disappears and he's lost. And it's actually, I've asked a number of friends. I have a friend who makes horror films, a professional theatrical filmmaker. And he's like, he is absolutely using the language of film at that point. Like that, the cinematography, those choices, that's straight up cinema. We're long past musical theater.
Right. I want to say something about that is that funhouse sequence, that is only for the camera. Like there's nobody in the stadium that can see that sequence.
Yeah.
And I don't think anybody's ever done anything like that at the Super Bowl before. I mean,
no one has ever done anything like that. And you are watching it live, and many people found it frightening. I did too. It's very disturbing. And then he runs back out, and now I think maybe now it's actually where it's the gospel people. So I got my sequence wrong. And now we have a projection of the moon at night, which we don't realize is actually a projection on a screen because it is night.
It's rising behind the city, right?
It's rising behind the city, but it looks like it's the real moon because of the way it's pitched, and they're really using the stadium to full capacity. And we can see lights in the stadium, but we don't know what is people and what is just light. But it's fine because we've already established that he's in a large metropolis. So everything has it. And the songs are very introspective. Actually, he's on a riser. I'm sorry, when he runs out of the funhouse, he's still on a riser on the bleachers looking down at us as he slowly descends. And then the best part comes, Randall, where the masked people come back on and they do what you call that he
takes the football field, and I think he does what's almost a traditional field show that a marching band would do, where he fills the field and there's nothing on the field but people. His doubles wearing the bandage faces and him.
All 6 feet apart.
Mm-hmm. And
all properly socially distant.
And they have a coordinated dance routine and movements like a marching band might have in a field show. And I love how he uses that traditional language of halftime shows to add to his show. I mean, it's pretty brilliant, I thought.
They do that thing. Is that the thing where I remember Columbia's marching band did it, where they'd be in precision and lockstep, and then they break into this weird thing where they just kind of go back and forth, and it looks like they've lost it. And then they come back in lockstep. Have you ever done that when you were?
Our marching band was not so sophisticated, but we did some moves, yeah.
So they also do something that I've never seen done before. Once they have the band, I'll just call them the band, they're not, but once they have the duplicates, the clones on the field, they do something I've never seen before, which is they use the same cam that they use to film the football players in live motion for them in live motion. So now you have the same dynamism of watching a football game being used for the dynamism of those guys as they take the field. And they literally, it's interesting too, because it's exactly what happened to Justin Timberlake when he was hosting. But the difference is Justin Timberlake getting lost in it was a default problem. It was poorly done. Here, him getting inundated by his own clones as he starts to disappear and they just start to overtake things, it makes it menacing and frightening. A number of people have referenced the movie Us because they wear that mask, and I've also heard that he's worn that mask in various different concerts. The mask, what is it supposed to represent?
Well,
I guess
it's part of his ongoing it's his ongoing commentary on plastic surgery in Hollywood.
And celebrity and hiding yourself and identity and some pretty big, he's dealing with some big issues of how he sees himself and how people see himself and pain, and whether or not it's brilliant or it's very common that young rock stars seem to love to write about how hard it is to be a young rock star. I'll grant you that in and of itself, but it's so visceral.
You know what?
At the very end, they all land on the floor and he's the only person left standing. And we pull out, and it ends literally with him basically standing on a ground of people who look just like him, who I feel are dead. You know what I'm saying?
And
which is very isolating if you think about it. If the theme has been isolation, then to found yourself not only not connecting with other people, but all the other people around you dead. Great one for COVID, folks. Great choice. Go ahead.
And then the final shot is there's fireworks going off in the sky, and there's a camera that's very low, and it's looking up into Weeknd's face, and you can see behind him the fireworks in the sky, and that's the final shot. And it's a shot that's totally in camera. I mean, the people in the stadium would not be able to appreciate that unless they looked at the monitor. So, I mean, it's a totally boundary-breaking halftime show. When
you see the look on his face, it's not like, oh, I put on a good show. Much like Lady Gaga, much like Madonna, not like anybody, he's not really being an entertainer in that moment. He's really saying he's playing the end of his character. He even refers to it as the character. So at the end, he's alone. There's a fire behind him, the fireworks, the bodies of himself are on the floor, and he looks lost, doesn't he? It's not like it's not a pleasant ending. And I'll be honest with you, it's I like it. You could certainly say that what he's saying is has certainly been said better and before, but it's to end a Super Bowl halftime show. It's a big choice.
Well, we're about to talk about this more, but I really think, and I was telling you this before the show, Chris, I really think that artists can't resist making art and introducing new art that is personal to them during the Super Bowl, and that includes the halftime performers and the people making the commercials. And it's kind of crazy to think about because, this costs so much money, but it's like I think it's like they can't help themselves, Chris, because the audience is so huge.
But prior to this, I'd say Madonna or Lady Gaga or Katy Perry, they just did the art of the particular song. So each song or a couple of songs worked thematically within a spectrum. Even last year's show was more like a celebration of culture, but this one, no, the songs all served a story, and they were all the same story. It had a beginning, a middle, and an end, and it ends on a very dissonant note. And the fallout of this is not good. A lot of people the next day were talking about it, and they were like, yeah, man, in the middle of a pandemic and a politically divided America, I really needed to sit through this nihilistic, dark work. Bring back Kool and the Gang in celebration.
It was definitely like the most ambitious, aesthetically most ambitious halftime show of all time, probably. I mean, I would
say that he crossed over into art, right? It was the most artistic.
Oh yeah, I definitely agree with you. I mean, yes, and he gets. You have to give him a lot of credit for that. I mean, even if it doesn't work for you, you have to admit that he was trying something completely new.
Well, he had a point of view, and he had something that he wanted to say. It was very relevant to the times we're living in today, which is that feeling of losing and gone and death and being overridden by a horde of people who want to attack you. I mean, all of the themes that he's talking about are very relevant. Clearly, he has a point of view that is specific to himself, and he didn't really care. He used great entertainment, but he wasn't trying to distract you or divert you. It's not an Alice Cooper show, It's not Black Sabbath, It's not even Bowie, He's really trying. He's not trying to go. He's not even like. I know that he works with Daft Punk, but it's not even Daft Punk. It's not like weird. It's not even Devo. I know we talked about this a bit. It's really he's not just saying, look how arty I can be. Look how entertaining I can be. He's taking these aesthetic tools to make a point. And if you don't like that point, I don't really think he cares.
Well, what could you expand more on what you think he's trying to say? You think he's trying to say this is a alienating, scary times?
Yeah, and I think that the individual disappears, and I think he is talking about that. I think that when you see all those people lying dead on the floor, I don't know if he's saying you lose your individuality or whether he's making a comment about COVID. It's certain. It's where it's deliberately ambiguous is where it's truly, for me, the most interesting. Like good art, good art doesn't answer every question. It has some deliberate ambiguity that forces you to have to fill in your own thoughts. Unlike entertainment, which does all the thinking for you. That Katy Perry, she was on a horse. She was on a lion. She danced with a shark. She likes California girls. That's why they're wearing, no knock on Katy Perry. I'm just saying, but there's no ambiguity in Katy Perry. She shows you what it is and you enjoy it.
Well, the lack of ambiguity in Katy Perry is, I think, one of her strengths. But yes, I mean, I can enjoy both of them.
There's no ambiguity in pop music, theoretically, because pop music is supposed to make you just feel good. That's why I'm saying I wouldn't be surprised if next year this is the same equivalent of the wardrobe malfunction, and next year they'll go back and they'll
you know what? I hope
they'll get Taylor Swift,
Well, I hope that the Weeknd is going to be influential here. I think he will be. I mean, I think
it'll be Dolly Parton.
Everything after this is going to look silly if it's just another concert show.
And I'm not knocking Dolly. I just wanted to get into the segue because of commercials.
Yeah, let's talk about the commercials a little bit. So
that was kind of funny, that 5 to 9 one, as opposed to 9 to 5.
Oh, all right. What'd you think about that?
One of the things that you can really see that's going on right now is there's very little production going on for film and TV. So there's a lot of actors who are just unemployed, and there's a lot of directors and there's a lot of people in the industry in this town who are not working. And I have never seen so many celebrities in commercials as I saw this year. in the Super Bowl ads. I mean, and almost all but and correct me if I'm wrong, but I want to say all but Brad Garrett were just playing themselves. You know?
Brad Garrett was in what was the it was for
Jimmy Johns. He was channeling the ghost of Dennis Farina as essentially a Scorsese-esque mobster. And I got to tell you, I would have paid money to watch a movie where that Brad Garrett character is the villain or the hero. I wouldn't have cared which. He was so transformed. It was just
everything was perfect
funny
about that visually. Everything. I mean, it was a Scorsese movie, gangster movie parody, and it was perfect.
And I hate Jimmy Johns. You know,
come on now, Chris. They're
really
one of our
do.
sponsors.
I hate what but it's so like. First off, I remembered it was Jimmy Johns. But Brad Garrett really acted. He didn't just cash in on himself. The other one that was kind of interesting as a performance was I actually thought Timothy Chalamet. I can never say his name right.
Chalamet, I think.
Timothy Chalamet. I liked him as Edgar Scissorhands, and it was nice to see Winona Ryder return to the part. I know that Tim Burton actually really liked it. I found out.
Yeah, that was an ad for an electric Cadillac, right? That had self-driving.
Yeah, that you just drive with a bunch of scissors. But I liked it. You know what I'm saying? I actually would have seen that film too, by the way. I would have seen a sequel to Edward Scissorhands.
You know, it was well done. And, you know, Winona Ryder is one of the great actresses of our living actresses, and she doesn't get any credit for it.
But then the rest of it really was for them. And I'm not saying this is a bad thing, actually, but there was a lot of ex-Saturday Night Live people. And actually, I'm sorry, we did get to watch The Wayne's World. So, you know, that they did that again. They brought back Wayne and Garth with Cardi B, who I feel is like the go-to now when you want to say that you're hip.
Well, Cardi
without
B,
actually being hip, you know.
Well, Cardi B is filling that space where she's just super popular and she's super dirty and edgy.
Yeah.
And so it's a space that it's a really good place to be if you're like in pop culture, I think. And so she's going to get a lot of
she's
offers.
Keeping Little Kim out of work, and Nicki Minaj. Nicki Minaj is probably going to take her down just for that reason.
I don't know. I think Little Kim and Nicki Minaj tried to get into that space like years ago, and they almost made it, but not quite. Yeah. I think she's really. I mean, she's gotten into that space better than anybody like that I could think of.
I did have to admit I enjoyed watching it's not great, but it was good. Yeah, Cardi B is obviously it's like T-Pain, you know, it's like whenever you want to reference something that both grown-ups know is edgy and dangerous and hip, you go to Cardi B. Did you feel like they just stepped into their parts again and magically brought back Wayne and Garth?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't think it was that great, but it really reminded me, because as performers, you know, Dana Carvey and Mike Myers are so great. I mean, those are two of the greatest comic actors, you know, have ever been, probably, and it was just magic that they had got to work together on Saturday Night Live.
Yeah, it was nice to see that back. There was a lot of Saturday Night Live people. I think actually what I thought was one of the funniest commercials using a Saturday Night Live person was the Rocket Mortgage with Tracy Morgan. She did two of them, Tracy Morgan. They were so funny. It was all about maybe versus definitely, and he takes these people and he tortures them with all these things that could go wrong. My favorite of the two is the one with David Bautista, you know, and it was very edgy and dark.
Yeah, Dave Bautista is a great straight man. Tracy Morgan is always Tracy Morgan, and he's a great comic character all by himself. Yeah,
that's true. He's a very defined persona. So it's the Tracy from both Saturday Night Live and 30 Rock. You know, the one who just doesn't care if you live or die.
Well, you know, the interesting about Tracy Morgan, like if you watched him on Saturday Night Live, he developed that character during his time on Saturday Night Live, and by the end of Saturday Night Live, he was almost fully developed, and it was great watching that.
Is that built on his stand-up persona?
I don't even know if he did stand-up.
Oh, maybe he's a stand-up comic.
Well,
So
I
I think
I
it
don't
comes
know
out
where
of the stand-up persona.
I don't know that much about him, but
It's a working stand-up, and that's I think his stand-up persona.
well, I believe that he didn't have that character fully fleshed till the end of SNL, but I'm not sure.
Yeah. Anyway, that was pretty funny. The Jason Alexander shirt was pretty funny.
Yeah, the Jason Alexander hoodie advertising Tide. That was really great. That was really great.
It was so surreal. Whereas like some of the things that were deliberately trying fell flat for me. Like I just couldn't care less about flat Matt McConaughey.
Yeah, I mean that was visually striking, but it's one of those things where you hope the visual gag will carry the whole thing, but it doesn't.
Or the Shaggy Wasn't Me with Shaggy and Aaron Mila
Ashton
Kunis
Kutcher and
yeah.
his girlfriend
Mila Kunis.
Mila Kunis. Yeah.
Yeah, it fell flat, you know. There were a number of inspiring commercials, as they always have. Far more inspiring commercials now than ever.
Well, I want to say the most emotional one was the Jessica Long story advertising Toyota. Yeah. She's a swimmer with no legs. I mean,
she's a paraplegic Olympic athlete, and it talks about adoption, and it's great. It's really, in one sense, it's somewhat manipulative because it pulls on your heartstrings. It's recreating things as opposed to documentary style, but it is. So there were three commercials I really want to talk about because all three of these commercials made interesting choices that sparked some degree of controversy. And I want to talk about No No Norway, as it's called, with Will Ferrell.
No Way Norway, yep.
No Way Norway, thank you. Norway. Now, for many people, I asked my friends on Facebook, this was their favorite. This is the funniest. This was the one that really, you know, and if you haven't seen a Will Ferrell movie since Eurovision, which you should really catch, takes place in Norway, by the way. It's super funny, Will Ferrell. You know, he gets Kenan Thompson and Awkwafina, right? And they're going to go to Norway, and you can tell they did it. It was very expensive, and you know, and he what is the premise that he doesn't want Norway to be the leader in the electric car?
Yeah, he finds in the beginning of the commercial, Will Ferrell finds out that Norway is the leader in electric vehicles, and he's disgusted by that fact because he wants it to be the United States, and so he decides he's going to go to Norway and tell him off or something. GM is coming out with an electric car. That's what the commercial's all about.
Yeah, so it's very funny. Is it 30 seconds or a minute?
Wow, I thought it was 2 minutes. I'd have to look it up, though.
And I think it's about 30 seconds. Now, keep in mind, folks, 30 seconds of ad time is $5.5 million. So it looked pretty expensive. How much?
The extended version's a minute 30, but I don't know what.
No, but the one that they aired, I think it was about 30 seconds, possibly a full minute. So that was like anywhere from like 5.5 million to 11 million.
Yeah, the original's a minute.
Yeah, a minute. So it was $11 million, pretty expensive.
That's just for the buy the ad time.
Just to buy the ad time. And you know, spoiler alert, he actually ends up in Sweden. Sorry, gonna tell you that.
You ruined it. Spoiler alert.
But it was so
1
great
minute commercial.
because all of these people in European cultural affairs and European politicians in Norway, all of these Norwegian politicians, they issued like this thing where like, you know, they joked about it. They pretended to be offended. They pretended, you know, that they still want that slice of pizza that Will Ferrell wants to deliver them, you know, because and all sorts of inside jokes. And then Ford even gets in the act because I guess they're the #1 electric car maker in Norway, and they give a dig. But people do talk about it the next day, and it's funny, and then maybe it's kind of really where we're at these days, where, you know, it's goofy humor. Like one of the worst commercials, I should have brought it up, was Fiverr, which is just a bunch of Trump jokes. But Trump is like 2 weeks ago, you know? So this kind of gentle, goofy ass humor, people loved it, and it really hit well. What'd you think of the No No Norway ad?
It's No Way Norway, and you know, I don't know. I thought the humor was it didn't work for me that well, but I mean, it's a fun ad. It's a fun ad.
Fair enough. And I think, but it's cheeky, and it's cheeky, and they was deliberately made stuff. So then another ad that's very controversial that I thought was really terrible was for Oatly. Oatly is a company makes oatmeal milk. So what it's the owner of Oatly, Tony Peterson, in a field in Sweden, in a field of oat wheat, and I think he goes, wow, wow, wow,
Wow, wow, no cow.
and that's it.
Duh, duh, duh. He's playing
That's
a piano.
all he does.
He's playing an electric piano.
Electric piano, and he's like the worst singing voice. And it's 30 seconds. And by the way, the amount of time that it took Randall to actually sing, that was like 4 seconds. So it's mostly just him playing this poorly on a keyboard in the field, and it's horrible.
Where's
and
this?
I was
Yeah, go ahead.
hold on. So it turns out, not only is it horrible, but he actually filmed it in 2014. So the video is it's 7 years old. Originally shown in Sweden. It was banned in Sweden because the milk people didn't like how it implicated milk in a bad way, and it's just terrible. But here's the neat thing: if you had gone to the website for Oatly that day, they were giving away T-shirts that showed him in the field, and what did it say? Like, look how terrible he is.
Something like I hated that Oatly commercial or something.
I hated that Oatly commercial, right? And then like stand-up comics the next day were riffing on it, and it went viral. You know, people have put it on Spotify. They have it as a ringtones. Everybody wants to hear that song, and they sold out of the T-shirts, and it did really make you think about the fact. I mean, definitely know if you never heard of oat milk before. You now know about it, right? I mean, it's memorable.
Yes. The T-shirt they made said, I totally hated that Oatly commercial.
Yeah. In a weird way, it's kind of a punk aesthetic, isn't it?
It's very punk rock. It's very Gen X. You know, it's very, I got to duct tape my shoes because they're falling apart. I mean, the kids today will never understand this, but
kids like weird irony, though. So weird irony works with them, too. So I think everybody kind of enjoyed. You know, it's funny. We just talked about Bernie Sanders like a few weeks ago. It's again one of those things where in a world where everything is so polished, so not well put together, it's almost refreshing. The guy at Ad Age said it was the cheapest commercial ever because even though it's $5.5 million of ad time, they spent no money on anything else. It was a low budget commercial that they shot 7 years ago, so it cost them nothing to re-air it. And it's the owner, so they don't even have to pay him. You know, he wrote the music. They don't have to. It's quite literally. It's so cheap. So it's cheap, it's ugly, and it's highly memorable. And it's punk, and I guess
it's totally punk rock.
We just talked about this in another episode too, about when we talked about Warhol and outsider artists. That there's something almost dissonant, you know, when you create something that's so it's disruptive, you know. We're expecting things to be clean and polished and brilliant, and they're so bad that they become memorable for being so bad. Crazy.
It's a great aesthetic choice that they made. Let's be honest.
It is, even though it actually didn't please it. It's certainly it's art and not entertainment. Well, in a sense, because it certainly.
Well, they're trying to get attention and be memorable.
And it offended me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're trying to get attention and be memorable, and it succeeds.
So the most controversial one, and one that a lot of people probably won't agree with, my favorite commercial of the Super Bowl. Was it yours as well? We talked about this. No, I guess the Paralympic one was, right?
My favorite one?
Your favorite?
I don't know if I had a favorite. I do like the Jimmy John's one. That was really good.
Okay. Well, definitely one of my favorite ones was called The Middle by Jeep, starring Bruce Springsteen. And it's 2 minutes long, which means it cost $23 million to air. It's a documentary. The guy who just did Springsteen put out 2 documentaries in the last 3 years. It's the same director who directed those, who directs it. It takes place quite literally in the middle of America and a church that is open, that anyone can come in. And it's just Springsteen and some very old Jeeps. And you don't see anybody else. It's just him. And he's just talking about how America needs to come back together. and how, and he's equating, I think, the metaphor of meeting in the middle with literally physically being in the middle. And he's equating a church, not, I would argue, with the religious reasons, as much as the idea that there's a common space that we can all share. I thought it was very elegiac, very beautiful. I thought it was an amazing comment for the times that we're living in, not so much maybe. And he talks about it a little bit about COVID, but I think more it addresses the lack of unity in our society. And it's interesting because what I did in my research, I don't know if you knew this, is that Jeep had wanted to work with, Jeep is owned by a conglomerate that used to be called Fiat Chrysler. Do you know what they're called now? Do you have their name?
I could look it up. I'm not sure.
It doesn't matter. It's an Italian company that owns Jeep, even though it's an American icon. They also own Dodge. And for the last decade, strangely enough, about 2012, so 9 years, they've been putting out these 2-minute commercials, either for Dodge or for Jeep, that almost always take place in middle America or in cities like Detroit that feature voiceover narration or an actor of note. They wanted him in 2012 for one was going to call Halftime in America. You might have seen it. It was with Clint Eastwood. And again, it's in America that is coming back after economic devastation of the back when the crash of the market back in 2009. And they look at Detroit and how it's putting itself back in. It's an inspirational speech from Clint Eastwood about how he can get back together. And they wanted him for that. And Springsteen doesn't do commercials. And they approached his manager because the owner of Stellantis is a giant Springsteen fan. And they said, that's very nice, but Bruce isn't going to do it. And then every year after that, they would approach Bruce. There's another one called Farmer. And again, it's the same idea, except this time it's a voiceover narration by Paul Harvey about what it's like to be a farmer. And you just see scenes of farmers. They're all done in a somewhat of a documentary style, wouldn't you say, Randall?
Yeah, yes.
And you should watch them. They're really good. All of them are good. In fact, Farmer, the only downside of Farmer is Paul Harvey says, and there's no greater moment than when a son turns to his dad and said, I'm going to be a farmer too. And that seems so sexist. So like 4 years ago, they did one from an 18-year-old girl who was now taking over the family farm. It's gorgeous. You know, it's one of the best. It's even better than The Middle, if I was to be honest with you. But they're all really good. And then Springsteen decided that after 10 years, given the division in our society, he really wanted to do this. He didn't use any of his own music. He composed brand new music with a musical arranger he normally works. So it's just score music. Again, he chose his director. He worked with this. He was pitched by an ad agency out of Michigan. And it was just one of those moments, really, where the guy, by the way, who had owned Stellantis had died. It was his second who took over, who was able to get Springsteen to agree. But they finally felt like this was the time. And a lot of people find it, I guess, preachy?
You know, I don't know what it is. It's everybody hates Springsteen because he's rich, I think, is one of the problems. And Springsteen is trying to come across as like a normal person. I mean,
it's funny because the intention was to unite people, and it did. It united people on the left and united on the people on the right to hate Springsteen and to hate this commercial. I mean, not joking. It's you know, it's like they're like, I guess he had a DUI in November and it was hidden. And now it's like, oh, he can't even be driving that Jeep. I don't think he is driving that Jeep. But even if he is, like, oh, he's in violation of his DUI. Or like, oh, well, you know, he's just a limousine liberal. Or he's just a shill for, like, this country today, there is a division. And I apologize because I'm about to piss off a lot of you wonderful human beings. But there are people in this country right now who honestly believe that if you don't see things from their perspective, then you're playing for Team Satan. And I get your point, by the way, because there's some pretty horrible people right now in this country who are playing for Team Satan. But the people who are playing for Team Satan are a very small group of people. And they've convinced a lot of people that it's a much larger group of people. And, Springsteen has always been a guy, if you really think about it, even though he's had political affiliations, I've never really seen him do more than try to appeal to people. He's a humanist, is what I say. Don't you think?
I don't know that much about Springsteen. You're a way bigger Springsteen fan than I am.
Then let me explain. Bruce Springsteen, who rose to prominence in the mid-1970s, singing about what it's like to be a working class person, even though he himself is not a working class person, based on his observations about what life was like for the people who grew up around him. And as he got older and matured as an artist, his interest stopped being just about working class people from Asbury Park, but people all over America. And it became broader and wider. And he became, for the most part, almost a folk singer, in that he starts really focusing on economic hardship, racism, sexism, and the difficulties of getting by in life. Now, he did this as a very wealthy guy who came from a decent family. But people have always considered Bruce Springsteen to be very authentic in his point of view. He's a big fan of Woody Guthrie. He's a big fan of the West. He wrote an album in 1982 called Nebraska, which is about economic devastation. It came out after Atlanta. 80 was what? The River. So he has these great albums. Even actually, they're a trilogy. The River, Atlantic City, and Born in the USA are all kind of about America coming apart at the seams. So in many ways, so much of what he's been talking about over the course of his career is about suffering and about unity. So it's totally on brand.
Well, I think one of the problems with Springsteen is that the younger generation doesn't understand Springsteen enough. Like, they're not as acquainted with
I don't know. I just literally, just before we started the show, got into a 20-minute argument with a friend who's exactly my age, who's liberal, about how horrible Bruce Springsteen is as a human being and how horrible this song is.
Why is Springsteen so horrible?
And then I have another friend who is a much bigger fan of Springsteen than I am, has spent tons of money seeing him perform, who is to the extreme right of my friend who's to the extreme left, saying the exact same thing. So I will tell you, it's not that young people care, because I don't know if young people even listen to Springsteen. Maybe they do. But it's the very core audience of people who have followed him. Middle-aged people like myself, boomers, people in their 40s like you, up to people in their 70s like him, who are furious, like, how dare you, Bruce? You've always been a champion, because Reagan thought Born in the USA was a song about American pride. Listen to the song carefully, it's not. But people have spent their whole lives misinterpreting Bruce Springsteen. So they're very upset that he finally stated a point of view. And as opposed to being deliberately ambiguous, he is being very definitive. Now, you could argue it's not art, it's just a diatribe. But I would argue, no, it's pure art, because he is using this documentary style commercial, this elegiac commercial, to express his feelings. Even if he didn't write the words himself, then he is the vessel that the words are expressed. And like any really good artist, he alienates people. And it's funny, because I was thinking how much this is so much like The Weeknd, except he's coming from the opposite point, right? Because The Weeknd is talking about how alienated and estranged he feels, and that upsets people. And then Springsteen's talking about let's all come together, and that alienates people just as much. America, what the hell do you want?
I was thinking, I wasn't going to bring this up, but something that this show made me think about was the ongoing culture war in America, especially with Donald Trump's impeachment trial going on right now. And the Bruce Springsteen commercial made me think about it too, is there seems to be this ongoing culture war in the baby boom generation, starting from the 1969 era, where you have, the flashpoint is like Vietnam. You have the people on one side that are rah America, they're nationalists, we need to be in Vietnam because the government tells us, and the other side saying that you can't trust the government, and they're hippies, and they're woo woo, and it's like an old culture war that I feel like.
Yeah, but I think
Bruce Springsteen seemed to always be on one side of it, and maybe he stepped into it this time.
Well, I think
he got out of both sides of it. He's trying to step out of this old culture war, and he can't.
I think that you're talking about everything that made Bruce Springsteen until last year, when we could just say the cultural war was between left and right, between Vietnam and pro-Vietnam. But now the culture war is based on COVID, both as health and the economic devastation, and also those who supported Trump and those who opposed Trump and what Trump stands for. And now we are a nation wrought asunder. And in a sense, Super Bowl is when we all get together and celebrate something. We cheer. The only competition ideally at a Super Bowl party is whether you're rooting for Tom Brady to show what an amazing guy. To me, the Super Bowl is just about this guy named Tom Brady who's constantly fighting off old age to win again. But for some people, the Super Bowl is really about defeating Tom Brady, who's the Darth Vader. So it's either that Tom Brady is awesome and he's the hero, or he's the reoccurring villain. But that is what the Super Bowl has been up to. But I feel like in some senses, this was like the Thanksgiving where we invited everybody, and it was a bad idea from a health perspective, and everything went to crap. So what am I trying to say here, Randall? I'm saying that there's definitely some entertainment in the Super Bowl commercials, and there's definitely entertainment in the halftime show. But when you step into the realm of something a little bit more artistic, like The Weeknd or like Springsteen, two artists who are singers and have played to stadiums and have a large following, when you're willing to step out and make a big statement, then I think you've hit the realm of art. It may not be good art. I'm not saying either men made great art, but it's personal art. It's a statement, and I think you then take the risk of offending people. And I wonder if next year the commercials or the halftime show will become even more like what we just saw with Springsteen and The Weeknd, or less, and they'll retreat back into something that's just more appealing to everybody, like the Will Ferrell No No Norway or the Black Eyed Peas, everybody.
Well, I thought it was a great, artistically, aesthetically speaking. It was a inventive Super Bowl, and I think we're living in an era, we're living in a peaceful era, relatively. It's kind of like, I feel like it's kind of conservative, like the 50s, but that was a great era for art, and I think we're going to see next Super Bowl, we're going to see even better art. It's going to be even more interesting halftime show and commercials. That's my feeling. The Roman Empire had their public buildings and statues, and we have the Super Bowl, Chris.
Well, the Roman Empire eventually fell, but hey, it also lasted for 800 years. Until then, I'm Chris. Until 800 years from now, I'm Chris.
I'm Randall.
Be safe, be well, and we'll talk soon.
Bye.
Bye. Just in, I'm getting an update from a friend of mine on the internet. I was going to tell you that of all the car commercials combined from all the other car companies, if you added all the YouTube views, it would not be as great as the amount of YouTube views the Jeep commercial got. Jeep commercials got like 25 million views, and that's all of the views for all the other car commercials combined. So in one sense, it's very successful. But as I mentioned earlier, there was a DWI bust Springsteen had in November. So I just found out, literally as of this moment coming in, from a friend of mine who hates Bruce Springsteen, that Jeep actually has taken down the middle, so you can no longer watch this commercial on YouTube because of the DWI, the driving while intoxicated bust. So, like really good art, I would argue, it also disappears. That's how controversial. So controversial, it can't even be shown again. If you didn't see it, I hope you copied it. Now it's got that bootleg quality. Anyway, I just wanted to keep you informed of the latest developments on that Bruce Springsteen Jeep video.
All right, thank you, Chris, and this is goodbye again.
Goodbye again.